Okay, let's wrap up 2023. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to finish off 2023, we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to talk about my favourite books of the year. We're going to do one for each month. We're going to talk about some stats and we're going to check in with my 2023 intentions. So hopefully this video won't be too long. I feel like it might be because obviously I've got like 12 books to talk about and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, settle in and let's kind of review my 2023 bookish year and see how it went. So I'm going to start with the intentions. So we're going to do intentions, some stats, and then the books at the end. Also, if you've been watching my content this year or following me on Bookstube or whatever, pause this video and see if you can guess in the comments what some of my favourite books are. I'm just going to go through like one for each month, but I have got 2 books that are kind of my joint favourites of the year. So see if you can work out or remember which books I've loved this year and which ones you think are my top reads of the year. Okay, so my 2023 intentions, I will leave the video in the description if you want to go over there and watch that. But I had 2 words for 2023, which was nourish and continue. I always pick a word of the year. Ended up with 2 last year, as you do. I feel like continue I did really well. I kind of carried on with all the things that I had going on. I've like met all of my responsibilities for last year and all of that good stuff. So I feel like continue worked really well. Nourish I was less good at. That was more about nourishing myself, which sounds a bit weird and egotistical, but I think that I'm pretty good at looking after other people and supporting other people, and I'm rubbish at turning that on myself. I did okay. I was ill a lot last year, both physically, and in June I was mentally quite unwell when I experienced burnout. So I feel like I give myself like half a tick for that one because I got one half of it definitely bang on. The other one, not so much, but you know, we continue, we try. My second goal was to read 150 books. I have definitely smashed that. Just to give you a little preview of my stats in a second, I finished on 163 books for the year, so I was really proud of that one, so I definitely did that. My third one was to post 1 video a week. I didn't quite manage this because I took a couple of breaks. However, I posted something like 62 or 63 videos in the year, so I posted enough content in the year for 1 video a week. It just wasn't always posted 1 video a week, if that makes sense. Like there were months where, particularly August, I think I did extra videos in August. Sometimes you just need a break and that's okay. But I am glad that I got a minimum of enough videos for 1 video a week last year, so that was good. So I'm like fairly consistent for you guys. I feel like consistency is really important, so I'm glad I've mostly managed that. My fourth one was to fundraise for Book Trust. We definitely did that. At the time of filming this, I'm filming this on the 1st of January. Last night I sat and did the charity donation. The footage of that is in my December wrap up, which will be up by the time this goes up, so you can go and see that there. And we donated £1,100, which is absolutely wild. We also did a smaller donation of £57 in August, which was from my birthday Just Giving page, so thank you as well if you donated to that. If you're not aware, this is a charity channel, so 100% of my AdSense, 50% of any sponsored content, and 100% of my Etsy store goes into a separate bank account, and on the 31st of December I donate it to our charity of choice for the year. And I also put in 2023 I put in £1 per book that I read as well, as a kind of donation from me, and then I sent the money across to Book Trust yesterday, and it was just the most wonderful thing. So thank you so much, because aside from the £1 that I put in per book as I was reading them, I literally couldn't do it without you guys. Obviously the AdSense is generated by you guys watching with the ads on and all of that stuff and not skipping ads. The Etsy store isn't possible without you guys buying bookmarks. That's also linked in the description if you fancy it. I have like 20 left of each design. There are new designs coming in the spring. And I'm still looking into like tote bags and stuff, but they are just really expensive to produce and like produce well. So that's kind of TBC, but there are more designs coming in the spring, which I'm very excited about. Amy is a complete master, and I'm really excited to see what she will come up with. So obviously, yeah, that doesn't happen without you guys buying the bookmarks, which blows me away every single time that happens. And obviously I wouldn't get paid content from sponsors if you guys weren't subscribed to the channel and showing support to my videos, and I just really appreciate it every single time that you do. So yeah, £1,100 plus the 57 that we got that we raised for my birthday is just absolutely incredible. I will leave Book Trust linked below, so you can see all of the work that they do. We're not fundraising for them in 2024, but they are an incredible charity. And also you can see on their website like the things that they use that money for. So yes, thank you so much for that. We 100% smashed it. 2022, when we first started doing this, we raised about £300 for Mind, which was amazing. But we have like absolutely, I was kind of in my head, I was like, it'd be really nice if we could raise 500 quid this year. So we have absolutely just blown that target, intention, goal, whatever, out of the water. Okay, number 5 was to keep my TBR to 50 to 80 books max. I did manage this. I have finished the year, I've just filmed, like I said, just filmed my December wrap up, finished the year on 42 books. So that's really good. Definitely stayed within that 50 to 80 bracket all year. So that was really good. I like to have some choice in my TBR. I like to have a shelf of books to choose from, but I get overwhelmed if it's too many books. So that was a good number for me. Number 6, I did not do, and this was quarterly unhauls. I am rubbish at filming unhauls, and I don't know why, because you guys always enjoy seeing them. I think it's because I think I've got a cat hair somewhere on my face. I think it's because I unhaul so many books that filming them starts to feel a bit overwhelming, which was why I set quarterly unhauls as an intention for last year, and then I just didn't do it. I think I filmed 2. I'll find the ones I did and I'll put them in the description if you want to see those. But I've continued to unhaul books. I've got like massive bags of books upstairs that need to be filmed so I can then get them out of my house. But for some reason, it's just a real mental block with me. So I'm going to try this one again. I don't think I put it in my official intentions, but I do want to stay on top of unhauling this year. I'm also, like I said, it's 1st of January and I've got such an urge to rip through my shelves and get some stuff out that I'm not going to reread. So I feel like there will be an unhaul video coming probably in February. Try and hold me to that. Number 7 was no books older than 12 months on my TBR. I smashed this one. It was a really good way of keeping my TBR fresh and keeping it full of things that I was excited to read, which obviously then helps my reading year. So I did that one. And number 8 was to keep up with ARCs. I did also do this. I said this in my 2024 intentions video. I feel like having ARCs, in case you don't know what that is, that's an advanced reader copy, is such a privilege. And I'm not having to go at anyone who doesn't keep up with their ARCs. I personally feel like there's a real responsibility to read them quickly and on time, and then if I love the book, to shout about it and help that writer by promoting it and all of that stuff. So yeah, I managed to keep on top of that, which was something I was proud of, because I am very, very lucky to work with several publishers and the occasional writer, author who contacts me directly. I don't accept loads of ARCs. I don't accept all of the ARCs that I'm offered. I will only accept them if they are books that genuinely sound good and that I'm going to enjoy, because that's the point. But I am proud that I managed to stay on top of that last year. So I would say of my intentions, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 out of 8, which is not bad going. Okay, let's talk stats, and then I will show you what most of you are probably here for, which is my favourite books of the year. So as I already said, I finished the year on 163 books read. Aside from 2020, which is the year that doesn't count, that is the most number of books I've ever read in a year, which is wild because I just didn't feel like I was reading loads this year, which obviously sounds ridiculous because I finished 163 books, which is my most successful reading year. Aside from 2020, which doesn't count because there was other things happening in 2020, which meant I could only really sit and read. So yeah, this year, as I was reading, I didn't feel like I was reading loads, but I clearly was. And given how busy my life is, I'm really proud of that number. So yeah, 163 books in the year, most I've ever read. And the page count, so I set my page count goal on StoryGraph at 50,000 pages. I was like, I will never make that. And I actually smashed it as well, because I finished on 50,516 pages, which is wild, okay? And my average star rating was 4.01. So as well as reading the most books I've ever read in a year and the most pages I've read in a year, I had a really good quality reading year. I did give out the least 5 stars I ever had in a year, sort of proportionately. I feel like I've become a lot stricter with 5 stars, and kind of I used to give them out a lot more. I feel like I'm a lot more critical at this point in my reading, and it's definitely if it feels like a 5-star, I will give it, but I had that feeling less this year. But it was still a really good, successful reading year. My best reading month in terms of the number of books was August, predictably enough. If you don't know, I'm a teacher, so I don't work in August, where I finished 23 books in August. That was absolutely wild. That was definitely helped by Bree's read along, which was the amazing readathon. I loved that. I was a co-host for Team Blue along with Brittany, and we just had the best time, and I read absolutely loads. So 23 books finished in August was my best month. My highest star rating month though was February, which was interesting, where my star rating was 4.41. So that's kind of interesting to think about. DNFs, I am very pro DNF. I think life is too short to read books you're not enjoying. It's too short for boring books, and I do DNF regularly. Bearing in mind though that I finished 163 books, my DNF proportion was low this year, which is good because I'm clearly like picking up the right things. But I did DNF, which in case you don't know means did not finish. So I DNF'd 24 books in 2023. Which averaged out obviously at 2 a month. Some months were higher than others. I think October was my highest DNF month. Let me just quickly skip back in my journal. Yeah, I DNF'd 5 books in October. I was clearly not messing around. So yeah, 24 DNFs in 2023 I think is pretty good. And then I am going to briefly talk about my subscriber count. I don't usually talk figures, like details, but I feel like this is wrapping up 2023. And obviously my channel growth is part of that. I've said this in other videos, but if you have been watching my content all year, if you have been watching my content from the beginning, or if this is your first video from me, hello, come on in. It's chaotic. I don't script things. I just film and chat about books. But yeah, however long you've been here, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. And this year my channel has had its biggest ever growth. So I started out in January with 2,919 subscribers. And in my head, I was like, it would be really nice to get to sort of 3,000 subscribers. I know I wasn't far away from it, but my channel growth has always been steady but slow. And we finished on the 31st of December with 3,553 of you, which is completely wild, which means that the channel grew by 634 people this year, subscribers this year. So thank you so much for being here. Like I said, if you have subscribed, like every time I get a notification that I've got a new subscriber, it genuinely, even after 5 years, makes me so excited and happy. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, so let's do what you guys are probably here for, which is my favourite books of the year. I don't do worst books of the year. I did used to do it. I've done it. I'll see if I can dig out some old baby What Victoria Read videos where I talked about my worst books of the year. I love watching other people's worst books of the year or most disappointing books of the year videos. I just don't like filming them. They just make me grumpy. So I just stopped filming them a couple of years ago. Like I said, I love watching other people, so that's not a comment on people that do make them. I, at the end of each month in my wrap-up vlogs, will tell you what was my most disappointing read of that month, and I feel like for me, that's enough. So I've got a massive stack of books here, obviously 12 of them. Each month I choose my favourite book of the year, and that automatically goes in favourite book of the month. That also automatically goes into my favourite book of the year pile. And yeah, we're just going to go through these. So in January, my favourite read of January was Other Women by Emma Flint. I actually had this at the time as an ARC, and I loved it so much that I went and bought a hardback copy of it. What's really annoying is it's got a sticker on it you can't remove. And this is a book I'm still thinking about. I was also very kindly gifted her debut novel for Christmas, which I'm very, very excited to pick up. And this is historical fiction. It's set between the wars, I think. Yeah, so we're 6 years after the end of World War One, and we're following 2 women. We're following a woman who is married, and we're following a woman who is having an affair with a married man. And we are looking at those 2 women whose lives are very different and are running sort of in parallel with each other, and then how those 2 lives intersect and what happens when they do. And it says on the front, a husband, a wife, a lover, each has a secret they'd kill to protect. And this is based on a real life case. There is also, I'm trying not to give too much away because I feel like it's a book you should just go into with kind of minimal information. There is also a court case caught up in this. And it's just a book that I have thought about regularly since I finished it. It's got so much to say about being a woman, about the choices we make. It's got some really interesting things to say about the kind of lost generation So obviously by the end of World War One, so many men and boys had been killed in that conflict that there was this generation of women who there weren't enough men to go around. So what did you do? Because as a woman in this time period, if you weren't married, you weren't really a real person. You weren't considered a real person. You had no autonomy. You had very few choices, and that would have been terrifying to be faced with. And I felt like Emma Flint dealt with that so well. I also feel like she stayed away from the cliches that could have come into this story, and by the end I was sobbing and cheering for these women. And talking about it now is making me want to reread it so badly. I might reread this this year. So yeah, that was my pick for January. Highly recommend it. Historical fiction done so cleverly. And like I said, I have got her first book, which I cannot remember the name of right now, upstairs on my TBR, ready to read very shortly. Little Deaths was her first novel. Loved this one. Obviously, I'm going to say that about all of them. So yeah, January was Other Women by Emma Flint. Okay, then in February, I finally read a book that had been huge the year before, and you probably saw on like favourite books of 2022 lists. And I finally picked it up and read it and absolutely freaking loved it. And that book was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I managed to get my hands on this Sprayed Edges signed edition, which Chloe was kind enough to pass on to me. And it's also got this really cool postcard in it. It's signed. I'm fully obsessed. I also read the second book, which is Shadow Cabinet, later on in the year. I was sort of hoping that would also make it into my favourite list. It didn't quite, but I was fully obsessed with this book. Cannot recommend it highly enough. So this is adult fantasy. A lot of these are fantasy, and I started out the year going, I'm not a fantasy reader, but I think about half of these are fantasy books, so I clearly need to stop saying that. And we are following a group of witches, as you can probably guess from the title. And we follow them from when they are kids in the 90s through to being adults. And there is a threat that is brewing that is threatening the magical world. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want to, again, with all of these, I'm going to be kind of brief, because I just want you to pick them up and go into them and not know too much and be swept away. I love this. I love Juno Dawson as a writer. She's easily one of my favourite writers and is definitely an author now for me. And this was clever and sad and funny, nostalgic. If you grew up in the 90s like I did, you definitely need to read this book, because the nostalgia is just 10 out of 10 perfect. And it's got a lot to say about identity and gender and sexuality and lies that we tell, both ourselves and other people. It's also about the kind of ties that bound us to each other. And it's about friendship, and it's also about toxic friendship and what to do if you realise you're in a toxic friendship. So yeah, I just love this so much. There was so much kind of female empowerment, and again, a little bit like Other Women. By the end, I was cheering, sobbing, just just absolutely love this book. So yeah, that was my pick for February. Then in March, I had a non-fiction that I listened to on audiobook, and I loved it so much that within the first 2 hours, I'd ordered the hardback copy. And I think it was Amy at Amy Myers and Hilary at Melted Books who had recommended this book. And I saw it on what was then Scribd, and I thought, yeah, I'll have a listen to that. That sounds really interesting. And then I was just completely hooked by it. So I treated myself again to a hardback copy. And that book was Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. Like I said, this is non-fiction. And I feel like if you like true crime, you should read this book. Also, if you're a language nerd like me, you should read this book. This was really clever and really interesting. And she looks at what makes a cult, but kind of focusing in on the language that's used. And then she applies that to kind of famous cults like Jonestown, but also to things like social media and to gym chains and all of that kind of stuff. And I just thought it was so clever, and it's really thought-provoking. And like all of the others on this list, I have thought about this book many times since I read it. And I just thought it was really clever. Like I said, it's accessible and it's funny in places, but there's also a lot of times when I was kind of like, oh, okay. And it made me pause and think. And I love it when non-fiction does that. This is the only non-fiction in this stack, which is rare for me. I haven't read that much non-fiction this year, not as much as other years, but this one, just absolutely loved it. I would also really recommend it. I got the audiobook on what was then Scribd, and I think she reads it herself. from memory, possibly not. Whoever read it did a really, really good job, and I would highly recommend this one. It's also got another really cool cover. There are a lot of cool covers in this stack, and I really like this one. So yeah, that was March. Then in April, I read another book that was hugely hyped last year. It was arguably the biggest book of last year, I would say, not just because it's chunky, because it is. And I had been avoiding it. And then for some reason, I just felt like picking it up. So I did. I think I went into a bookshop or did a little, like, maybe I vlogged it. I can't remember. But I picked this up at random because I was just finally, like, sometimes it takes me a little while to be ready to read a book. And I was in Waterstones. I think I was in Waterstones, and I was like, I'm ready to read this book. And I was obsessed by it. I hadn't read a book by this author before. They had a trilogy out that, I'll be honest, doesn't appeal to me. I think it's too heavy on the fantasy. This is also a fantasy book, but it's also dark academia. If you haven't guessed it by now, that book is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I was obsessed by this book. I'm still obsessed by this book. I think about this most days. And this is another fantasy one, but it's sort of fantasy dark academia, which is, you know, a corner of fantasy that I really like. I would say that this is also verging on dark academia as well. I just love this cover. I was not quick enough on the bandwagon to get one of the, like, beautiful sprayed edges. I'm still keeping an eye out for those. I loved this book. I loved it. Okay, so this is dark academia, historical fiction, fantasy mix. And I think R.F. Kuang does that mix really, really well. We're following a young man. As usual, I've forgotten all names. What was his name? I feel like it started with an R. Yeah, Robin. We're following Robin, who is brought to... It's Oxford, isn't it? Not Cambridge. Yeah, Oxford, as a child. From Asia. He's taken by a white man. And brought to Oxford and raised to be a translator. And that's all I'm going to say. And the quote that is often, the quote that's on this dust jacket says, an act of translation is always an act of betrayal. And we're set in Oxford in 1836. And this just, as a language, I'm such a language nerd, which is also why I loved Cultish. Two very different books on a sort of similar language theme. As a language nerd, I loved this because there was so much about roots of words, where words come from, etymology, all of that kind of stuff. You've also got the kind of moral questions and implications to do with translation. And there is a kind of crime element to this as well. I just absolutely loved it. It's huge. It's one of the biggest books I read this year. And I don't really usually read. This is 550 pages. I don't usually read. If you'd said to me at the start of 2023, I'd have been like, I don't read fantasy and I don't read chunky books. Clearly a lie. Because I love this and I read it really fast. I feel like I read it in like 2 or 3 days, and R.F. Kuang became an auto-buy author for me. So yes, Babel, that was my pick for April. I'm just looking down my list down here. Then in May, I had another book that really surprised me. This was another cover buy on a trip. I think I was by myself. Because another thing I didn't really read that much of until this year is romance. And I have got 2 romance books in this stack. Like 2.5, one that could also be considered a romance. Possibly not. And I picked up this book. I hadn't heard of it. Turned out to be a TikTok sensation. I'm not on TikTok. And weirdly, as soon as I picked it up, I then saw several people talking about it in videos. And I loved this and gave it 5 stars. And it was A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. I loved this so much. I was 100 pages in and I pre-ordered the sequel, which is now sat upstairs. It came in December. And I'm going to read that soon. And this is cozy fantasy with smut in it. We're following Mariel, who is a witch with a lot of power, but she is also kind of a klutz. I think she's kind of ADHD coded. I can't remember if it's specifically said on page, but she's quite chaotic. Her magic is quite chaotic. And one day in her kitchen, she is trying to use magic to bake, and she accidentally summons Oz, who is a demon. And he can't leave until she makes a deal to give him her soul. and this is about what happens to them. And like I said, it's a romance, it's steamy. I really liked all the steamy scenes. It's very cozy. It's kind of Gilmore Girls with magic. And it's got loads of stuff in here that I love. We've got found family, we've got descriptions of food, we have got kind of characters being empowered. I really loved the relationship between the two characters. It's enemies to lovers. I think there's a just one bed trope in here at one point. I just absolutely loved this. The writing was so fun and easy to read, and like I said, I bought the sequel very quickly, pre-ordered the sequel even, which is a companion novel, and I'm very excited to pick that up at some point soon. And yeah, this was an unexpected 5-star, which kind of automatically made it my pick for that month. Okay, then we are getting halfway through nearly. So in June, I read a book that didn't come out until November. I was very, very lucky to get an ARC. It was easily my most anticipated read of the year. Yeah, it came in June and it was due out in November, so I should have read it in October, but I was so excited I couldn't wait till then. And then I also I'd already pre-ordered the beautiful hardback, which I'm going to show you, but I did, like I said, have an ARC copy of it. And it's the prequel to a book that was my favourite read of 2022. So if you haven't guessed already, it was Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. So this is the second year in a row Travis Baldree has been on my favourite books of the year list. I cannot wait for whatever he brings out next. I will be pre-ordering it, begging for ARCs, doing what I need to do to get my hands on that book as soon as possible. And again, another gorgeous cover. So we are following Viv, who is an orc barbarian. And in Legends and Artes, which is the first one, we are following her when she is retiring. And this is a prequel. This is her just before she's sort of barbarian in training, and she gets injured, and so she is sent to the seaside town to recover. And again, I'm not going to say any more than that. This is just about what happens to her. This is cozy fantasy. Literally nothing happens, but I just had the best time with these characters. Viv is kind of recovering in this town. There's not much there. It's kind of a seaside town that's dying, and she comes across this bookshop that is really struggling, and it's about how she kind of makes friends. There's a little bit of a love story, and it's mostly about them kind of saving this bookshop and kind of putting it back together. And again, found family, descriptions of food, books, Travis Baldree's beautiful writing. Give it to me. I absolutely loved it, and I read it in June, months before it should have done, because I was just so excited. If you have not yet picked this up, or if you've got it on your shelves and you're not ready yet, I just cannot recommend it highly enough. I feel like it would be perfect for sort of January, February time, when it's like a little bit grey and cold, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere. And I just loved it. It says on the front, high fantasy, first loves, second-hand books. And just, oh, I'm so excited for his next book, which hasn't even been announced, and I'm still excited about it. Okay, so in July, I picked up another book. This I got in a bookshop in June when my brother took me secondhand book shopping. June was a hard month. Like I said already, my mental health took a real tumble, and I ended up signed off work for 2 weeks with burnout. And I went home for a little bit. It's funny, isn't it? I'm 36 and I still refer to my mum's house as home. I haven't lived there in nearly 20 years. But yeah, I went back to my family for a few days for a breather and to try and like just have a change of scene, all that kind of stuff. And my brother took me out on this lovely day where we went for brunch, and then we went book shopping, and then we went to this beautiful like lake and stuff. I'll put my June wrap up, so I did take some b-roll. He doesn't appear in it because he doesn't want to be on camera, which is absolutely fine. But we had it was just a nice day, and it was one of those days that my soul really needed. And I picked up a couple of books in a secondhand bookshop, and then in, what month did I say this was? July. I read this book, and it was the perfect time of year to read this. If you've got this book on your shelf, I would highly recommend that you read it in the summer. I would just highly recommend that you read it full stop, but it was a perfect like hot summer day read, and I think I did read it in a day, possibly two. That book was You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Kweki Emeze. This is an author that I had seen talked about all over Booktube. This book in particular, I think it was Shannon at 155 Books had read maybe an ARC. I know Olivia Savannah had as well, and they had both raved about it. So when I saw this beautiful hardback, I love the spine, in a secondhand bookshop. I think I got this, yeah, it's on the back. I got this for £4, which just seems like an absolute steal. It had never been read. It still had it's got the bookmark ribbon. That was still completely pristine, so it hadn't been read. It felt like it meant to be. I think sometimes when you're secondhand book shopping, you occasionally come across things and you're like, you are coming home with me. And obviously I loved this. This is literary fiction, romance. It's also about grief. It's about a woman who is newly widowed. She's a young widow. Her husband's died in an accident. And she meets this guy at a party a few months later, and it's about their relationship, how that unfolds. He takes her home to his family home, which is on an island. They are super, super rich. His dad is a really famous chef, and it's about how that summer unfolds. And I don't want to say too much about it. It's very adult. It's also got some steamy scenes in it, so just be aware of that going in. But I just loved what this had to say about grief and identity and love, and about the things we are willing to sacrifice for love, and about family ties. There's also food descriptions. Are you seeing the theme here with the books that I love? And I just felt like this was perfect. I finished it and I just thought, I can't give this anything less than 5 stars. It's actually perfect writing, and it was easily my favourite read of that month. So yeah, definitely loved this. I've read one more Kweki Emeze, which was Pet, which I read in December, which I very much enjoyed, and I definitely want to get to the rest of their backlist, and anything else that they write I will read. So yeah, so glad that I picked this up. The thing I'm learning from going through this stack is I need to listen more to the hyped books, and I need to read them, because this was also really hyped, I want to say, last year. I got there eventually, but yeah, this was perfect writing. Okay, then in August, we finished the reread with Chloe of the Helen Huang trilogy, which starts with The Kiss Quotient. And like I said, where are we up to? August, I read 23 books. So there was a lot of books I could have chosen as my favourite read of that month. However, the final book in the series, The Heart Principle, was my favourite read of August. I loved this, and it was really unexpected. I'd given The Kiss Quotient, I think, 5 stars. I'd given the second one 4 stars. I went to this with quite low expectations, and then it just absolutely blew me away. So in this one, we are following violinist Anna, and it's about her relationship with Kwan, who was a side character in some of the other books. They are companion novels. They are adult romances. They are very steamy. They are also have autistic characters. Helen Huang herself has autism, and I just really loved this story. I loved Anna. I loved the way that Helen Huang explained how she interacts with the world, how she sees it, how she feels in the world, and how it feels to move through the world as someone who is neurodivergent. I love the way that was dealt with. I also loved what Kwan has going on, which I won't say because it's not on the back, but he's got stuff going on in his life, and I loved the relationship and the chemistry between them. And this turned out to be my favourite of the trilogy, which hardly ever happens. It's hardly ever the third book. For me, it's usually the second book. I usually love a second book in a trilogy. But this I just thought was perfect and gave it 5 stars, and it was my favourite read of August, so it is in this stack. Okay, in September I picked up another book that people have been shouting at me to read for ages, particularly Charlie at Charlie Brooke Reads. She didn't shout, she doesn't shout, she's the most lovely, encouraging, kind person, but she had been nudging me towards this book for ages. I don't know why I hesitated to read it. I think it's because it has representation in it that is personal to me that I'd not seen before, and I was nervous how that was going to be done. But it came up on my TBR for September, so I picked it up, and lo and behold, it was my favourite read of the month. I also have the sequel upstairs to read, which I was very kindly gifted for Christmas, so that will be coming up soon. And that book is Like a Charm by Elle McNichol. This is middle grade fantasy. I feel like it's the only middle grade on this stack, which again is unusual for me this year. And we are following, what is her name? Ramya, who can see ghosts. It's set in Edinburgh, so it's middle grade fantasy. It's set in Edinburgh, and her grandfather has just died, and it's about she's given a mission by her grandfather after his death, and it's about the task that he set for her and how she completes it. And I loved this because the writing is beautiful. The main character is dyslexic and dyspraxic, which I am as well, and that I've never read a dyspraxic character that I know of, or like a kind of explicitly dyspraxic character before, and that was a really emotional thing for me, and I knew it would, and I think that's why I'd been shying away from this book for quite as long as I had. But I'm so glad that I read it. I loved it. Again, you've got found family, we've got friendships formed, we've got magic in it, we've got the whole kind of the idea of like coming into your power. All of that kind of stuff that I love was in this, and like I said, also beautifully written. I've got the second one upstairs and I am excited to get to it soon. I'm not going to say when, but it'll be soon. And yeah, this was just a perfect middle grade. Highly recommended. I can't wait to get this into my classroom library. I've got a couple of students who are also dyslexic and dyspraxic, and I feel like they will get a lot out of this, as well as the other students as well, who I'm sure will enjoy it. So yes, I absolutely love this one, and that was my pick for September. In October, I finished a 7-book series. I'm not a massive series reader. We've got, usually, if I read series, they're usually historical fiction ones. So we've got the Six Tudor Queens series there by Alison Weir, and then we've got the Matthew Shardlake series here by C.J. Sampson. I definitely didn't forget that name for a second there. But I don't tend to do big series. I've got like some trilogies that I've read. Sweet Peas, an ongoing series. These are the only really trilogies that I've read, but this was a 7-book series, and I've been reading them slowly over a number of years, and this is the final book. And I was kind of went into it, I've given the series 4 or 5 stars all the way through. I went in with quite low expectations because I was like, oh, it's the end of a series, not sure how this is going to wrap up. And then it was my favourite read of October, just checking my notes there, and it's a thriller. I can't remember the last time I put a thriller on my favourites list. And it's also, like I said, the end of a series. So that book is One for Sorrow by Helen Fields. This is the last book in the Luke Kalanick series, which starts with Perfect Crime, I think. I've put it on, Charlotte at Books and Bargains is doing a book club this year where she asked 12 or 11, I think, bookish creators to choose a book from her TBR for her to read, and then there's going to be a live show at the end of each month. I'm January. Spoiler for that video, which I'll link in the description. I love that video. It's such a good idea. I chose the first book in this series for her to read, which is a bit naughty because she doesn't have the rest. And she's on a book blind ban, but we'll find a way around that if she likes the first one. But I picked it because I need her to read all of the books so that we can talk about this one, because the ending, I was like screaming, crying, throwing up from this ending. So these are police procedurals set in Edinburgh, very, very dark, very gritty, check content warnings. And in this one, they are following, it says on the front, they think they're on his trail, but what if he's on theirs? And we follow Luke Kalanick and his colleagues on the Edinburgh Murder Squad. In every single book, they're following a different serial killer. They're really cleverly set up. Like I said, they are super dark. And just the ending of this one, I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in about 24 hours. And 2, the ending, I was not okay by the end of this book. And it's really unusual for me to have a really emotional connection to a thriller book. But there is something about Helen Fields' writing that just got right under my skin. So that was my pick for October. In November, I had a pretty poor reading month. And actually, nothing that I read kind of stood up with these books, okay? So at the end of each month, when I choose my favourite book of the month, it goes into a separate stack up there on top of my bookshelf. And I was looking at that stack and I was like, nothing I've read this month stands up to that. So I didn't choose a favourite read for November, and I decided to put in an honourable mention from another month. And I can't remember which month I read this book, which I should have checked before I filmed this video. But the honourable mention that I've decided to put in is from an author that we've already seen in this stack. That book is Yellowface by Rebecca F. Kuang, also known as R.F. Kuang, who wrote Babel. So I read 2 of her books this year, and both of them I was completely obsessed with. I also managed to get myself the Waterstones Sprayed Edges edition. I mean, I have tabbed it, which has slightly ruined the sprayed edges, but there we go. I did manage to get that beautiful edition. This, I feel like I must have read this maybe in August. Maybe that's why I didn't make it into my top for that month. But this was definitely an honourable mention, so I'm putting it in for November. I loved this book. This is contemporary literary fiction, kind of, with a mystery. And we are following, is it Juniper? I think it is. Yeah, June, who is a white author. And she is friends with an Asian author who dies. There's a freak accident, and the other author, whose name I should really know, Athena, when she dies, June steals Athena's last manuscript, and she publishes it under the kind of questionable name of Juniper Song, and it becomes an overnight sensation. And then people start to realise that June is not who she appears to be. And there are questions about where this manuscript has come from, and it's all about kind of how things unravel for her. I loved what this had to say about cancel culture and about who has the right to tell which particular stories. I also love that we have such an unlikable character. We are not supposed to like June. We are not supposed to be on her side. But you are still so connected to the story and the writing. I just couldn't put it down. And I needed to know how Rebecca F. Kuang was going to bring this story to an end. I got about 3/4 of the way through, and I remember saying, I think either to Charlotte or Gary, someone, I don't know how she's going to bring this to an end, because everything had just gone so crazy. But she just did it really skillfully. This was so skillfully written. I think I gave it a 4.5 rather than a 5. But I adored it. This cover, it was also absolutely brilliant. And like I've already said, I will read literally anything that Rebecca F. Kuang or R.F. Kuang or whatever name she's publishing under. I will read anything else that she brings out. So that was my November pick, my kind of substitution for November. Then in December, if you have watched my December wrap-up, you already know which book I'm about to show. I picked up a book at random. I finished my Christmassy reads. They'd all been fine, but I hadn't been like blown away by anything. And then I just picked up the next book on my TBR, going in kind of chronological order of when they came in. And I absolutely loved this book. That book is The Skeleton Key by Erin Kelly. Now, when I bought this, and I think it was on a solo day, like book trip, I might have done a vlog for it. I thought this was from my birthday. So on my birthday, I was very kindly gifted book vouchers for Mr. B's, which is one of my favourite bookshops ever. It's in Bath. And the lovely Charlie, I've already mentioned, from Charlie Reads, Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, who I've already mentioned, and Amelia from Amelia Barley Books all went in together to get me book vouchers, which was just so kind of them. I will link that vlog in the description. This is one of the books that I picked up, and it was a 5-star read. I picked this up and I thought it was historical fiction. I don't know why. Maybe something about the cover, which I am obsessed with. I thought this was historical fiction. It's not. I still really, really enjoyed it. It is contemporary. It's a contemporary mystery family saga, I would say. On the front it says, one book, a lifetime of obsession. And it is a book about a book. So 50 years ago, a writer called Frank created this picture book that had inside it loads of clues for where people could find treasure in real life. And it created this overnight sensation, and actually became dangerous. And after somebody died, Frank cancelled the treasure hunt and took the last prize and kind of put it in a vault and said, game's over. It's now 50 years later. They're doing the 50th anniversary kind of version of the story, and the family comes back together, and we're following Nell, I think it was, who is the daughter is Frank's daughter. And we are looking at secrets and lies. We are looking at the effect that this book has had on the lives of the entire family. And there is also a dead body that turns up. So we've got all of that going on. And I was just completely hooked by the writing. Again, it's quite long. It's over 500 pages, but it took me about 2 days to read it because I just couldn't put it down. And it was one of those where I was grumpy when I was having to put it down. I just wanted to sit and read this book at all times. I've only read one other Erin Kelly, which was He Said, She Said, or She Said, He Said. I can't remember which way around that title is, which is a thriller, which was okay. It was a few years ago. But I'm definitely going to go and look very closely at what else she's written and what else she's got coming out, because this absolutely hooked me. And I know these characters are going to stay with me, which for me is a sign of great writing. So those are my favourite books of the year, and I have 2 that are in the top spot. I don't do a ranking because I can't. That's why I just do, this is my pick for January, February, March, etc. But these 2 books are my favourites of the year, and I'm so excited for whatever the authors bring out. So in joint first place, we have Babel by R.F. Kuang and Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. Both of these I've been obsessed with all year. I want to reread them. I might reread them on audiobook at some point this year in 2024. I just want to read everything that these authors can possibly give me. So yeah, that is 2023 wrapped up. I've been talking for 45 minutes, which sounds about right. 2023 was a good year. It was a great year for reading. It was a great year for Booktube and content and fundraising for charity. I've got to do so many fun things this year because of the support that you guys give me. And this has definitely been a real bright spot in my year. I think the year in general has been tough at points. Like I said, I've had tricky mental health times, but we have made it through. and there's lots happening in 2024, and obviously I will take you guys along for the ride. So yeah, as I've already said, thank you so much for being here. I just appreciate every single one of you. Like, I cannot explain how much I appreciate you guys. If you made it to this point in the video, most of these books, a lot of these books were fantasy books. So leave me some sort of fantasy adjacent emoji, so like a witch or a magic wand, something kind of fantasy based, because apparently 2023 was the year that I became a fantasy reader, which is a twist that literally nobody saw coming. So please subscribe if you like more of this chaos, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks everyone. Bye.